From SF Land, this is Dorking Out, a podcast for people who love to dork out about movies, TV, and everything pop culture.
Welcome to episode 140 of Dorking Out. My name is Sonia Mansfield, and in this episode, I'm dorking out about a bunch of random stuff with my friend, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and nerd author, Christopher Allen Smith.
Yes, I have some updates on several of those biography points that I guess we're going to get to. So, I am now three-time Emmy winner, two-time Emmy keeper.
Wait, what? Oh, no.
That's right.
Okay, maybe we need to start at the beginning.
All right. So, when I was last on this show, the plan was to take some time away, retire from the show, dive into finishing the book that I was supposed to finish, dive into other projects that I was working on. But I believe that was 3 days before the campfire in Paradise, California happened. And I don't know how many of our listeners know this, but I live in Paradise, California. And
I would assume a lot of our listeners know that. I did talk about it on the show. Okay,
right. Yes. Sorry.
So there.
I'm behind in my podcast.
You're
listening.
Fine.
So
thanks for listening, Smith. Continue.
That's right. Unfortunately, I was one of the people that evacuated, lost my home, along with 95% of the population of Paradise, Concow, Magalia. And it's kind of upended all of our lives. It's upended my life. I am now speaking to you from the back of a trailer that my aunt and uncle were kind enough to lend us while we essentially try to rebuild our lives here in Chico, California. And yes, I was kind of joking that three-time Emmy winner, two-time Emmy keeper, because one of the Emmys, actually my favorite Emmy that I went up on stage with my sons, I left it when I left the house, never made it back, and probably 3 hours after I left, the whole place burned down, and it is gone. As are the notes, the handwritten notes for Jet Juergens.
Oh, no.
However, Harrison Smith, hero of the fire, over the last year had been typing them in, and he'd been looking for work and whatever and chores and stuff to do, and I had him type in nearly all of the notes.
Oh, that's great.
So they are all on Dropbox. Everything is fine. I'm going to be getting back to Jet Juergens, but
you have something else that you're
TBD.
Working. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we should talk about that.
Let's talk about that. I do want to kind of give a little bit of explanation. I try to be actually, this might actually be the first time the real Chris Smith has ever been on the show, because I usually try to be kind of the Weisenheimer, aloof, somewhat out of touch, somewhat dunderheaded, definitely blowhard Chris. And maybe it's my mood.
Stop pretending that that's not really you.
That's right. Maybe it's my mood. Maybe it's just what's going on. But I am actually about to embark on a pretty serious, probably the most serious chapter in my life, creatively and professionally. I think I'm going to be a little bit more cooler heads prevailing today. But
well, we'll see about that.
What I am.
Well, actually,
now,
do you want to start with? Do you want to talk about what you're working on, or do you want to maybe take us through the day a little bit of what happened?
Why don't I take you through the day? As we'll get to it. As many people who follow me online know, I'm going to be working. I'm working to make a docu-series about the campfire and all that, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah. So November 8th is when the fire started, about 6:30 in the morning. Laura, my wife, hater of the Gilmore Girls,
That's her official title.
Was in Milwaukee on a business trip. I was taking Dell, our youngest son, down from Paradise to Chico, about a 15 mile drive, about a half an hour, depending on traffic, because he goes to school down there. I got up about 6, or I got up about 7. We got going about 7:15, and when we went out, there was what I thought was kind of like a strangely placed storm cloud, because like the sky was pretty open, except there was this one pretty big cloud over kind of where the sun was coming through. So it was strangely beautiful. Dell and I started driving through Paradise to pick up a kid from that we usually carpool with. And as we drove up, we realized, oh, here's it's obviously kind of like a grass fire, some sort of wildfire. Mm-hmm. We turned on the radio, and they said that there was a fire in Polga, which is a town to be honest, was not a region I was not really familiar with, which is kind of a smaller little community near Concow, which is already kind of a small community here in Butte County. And the not to be unkind, but there have been several wildfires that have kind of started in that area over the years. So
it wasn't that unusual. You were like,
it wasn't that unusual. Okay. And it was kind of like, and my house, is literally opposite that area, or all of Paradise was between that area and my house.
Right.
So it was kind of like, and this is something we'll get into in the docu-series at some point. Paradise has always lived with the fear of fire, has always lived with an awareness that a catastrophic wildfire could happen, and we've been doing things to ameliorate it.
With the raking. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Raking.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Oh my God. Anyway, so I kind of figured this would have to be a world-changing, world-famous event for this to happen. It's never going to happen. They've got to, I've seen fires start around Paradise, and the CAL FIRE, CDF are usually Johnny on the spot with air tankers and helicopters, and they're very quick. So it's one of those things where they do such a good job that I figured, we're fine, whatever. So my older son Harrison was still asleep in bed. I drove down the hill, dropped Dell off, started driving back up the hill, because Paradise is kind of up on a ridge above Chico. And I was thinking, I'll get a coffee. I'll go, then I'll go back. And then I was going to do some work. And I was, figuring it would be a kind of a leisurely morning. But as I was kind of driving back, I called the mother of Dell's friend who we carpool with and said, hey, what have you heard? She knows some people in the sheriff's department. And she was saying, well, I talked to, so-and-so, who I'm not going to say, and they said, why don't you maybe pack some things up and maybe get ready and just keep an eye out. So, and as I started driving up, and I posted some pictures on my Facebook page of this, this kind of relatively small cloud had become huge. Like it looked like one gigantic cloud over the entire city of Paradise. So I went from, I'll take, I'll kind of maybe swing by Starbucks or swing by McDonald's and get something, and then I'll make my way up. And then it was just like, what? Maybe I better not.
Right.
I called Harrison and said, hey, you know what? Because we have a procedure. We were evacuated in the 2008 fires. Mm-hmm. And so ever since then, we've kind of have a plan. We kind of have boxes, things packed up in certain boxes that we know, like if there's a fire, if we have to evacuate, we just grab these boxes and all family heirloom pictures, important documents, et cetera, et cetera. So we can
really
just grab, and then we can go.
You guys are smart.
Thank you. Well, yeah.
No, you are.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it, but I am in no way unique, and this was in no way my idea. This is some kind of like best practices we read on the internet kind of stuff. So we had all that ready, and I said, hey, you know what, Harrison, why don't you get up, start looking around online, and see what you see. The Town of Paradise, townofparadise.org, is the website for our city, and they're very good about letting people know about wildfires and what's going on. And he went on there, and there were really no evacuations or whatever at that point. And we learned all of this kind of later, and the reason there were no really evacuations is because the fire started, I think 6 miles from Paradise. I could be wrong about that. It was so fast that at certain points it was moving 100 yards a second.
That is so scary.
Yeah, so it was essentially burning an acre a second. As you know, there are these 40-mile-an-hour winds, and it was just. And I've been to several meetings since then, where the sheriff of Butte County, Corey Honey, and the fire chief of CAL FIRE here in Butte County have given reports, and they said that this fire moved twice as fast as their worst case scenario.
Jesus.
So it's just like there's a certain point where you try to think of the worst thing that can happen. You try to plan for it. But if something worse happens, there's not much you can do other than try your best and do everything you can.
Yeah.
So anyway, by the time I got back, there's the road that connects Chico with Paradise is called the Skyway. It's about a 12 mile stretch of road. By the time I got back to the top of that, where, between Paradise and Chico is kind of the scrubland and, a nice view of Butte Canyon and, just trees and grass and whatever. And by the time there's kind of Chico, this big grassy area with wood, with trees and stuff, and then Paradise. So when I got to Paradise, it was like night had returned. Like there was no sun, there was no the air, which we had always seen, like smoke from the Reading fires or smoke from the fires in 2008. It was like, okay, it's smoke, it's up there, and it's kind of making the air look foggy or something. But this was like night. Yeah. Which was significantly creepy. So
yeah, it would be super. I would be beyond scared.
So like this was like, oh, this is different. It went from maybe we'll evacuate, maybe we'll take a while, to I'm getting home, I'm grabbing A, B, C, and D, I'm grabbing Harrison, and we're getting out. Mm-hmm. And I told Harrison, I had a work van. I was in our new car, a Ford Escape. And Harrison, he had his first car there. I said, look, what I want you to do is move your car away from the work van, because they're kind of parked back to back, and I couldn't get the work van out. Move your car away. We're going to pack up the work van. We're going to pack up the new car, and we're going to get out. I called back my friend who has contacts in the sheriff's department, and I said, hey, what have you heard? And she said she had gotten a call, which is essentially grab what you can and get out now. Leave now.
Now, did she get that call just because she knows someone, or was everybody starting to get that call?
She got that call because she knew someone, but at that point they had begun Paradise, after the 2008 fire, implemented a pretty good evacuation warning system, kind of like a reverse phone tree system, where the town would automatically call certain. I think the town of Paradise was broken up, I think, into 13 zones, and you know your zone. and they'll call you up and say zones this, 1, 2, 3, 4 are under. I think there was 3 levels. There's advisory evacuation, like an evacuation warning, and an mandatory evacuation,
right,
which is, hey, you better be aware of this. Pay attention. To, hey, you better get ready to go. To, we're ordering you to get out now.
Yeah, get the fuck out.
Yeah. Now the thing is, you can't really order people out of their own homes.
Sure.
But what you can do is say, we believe your life is in danger if you stay, and we, the first responders, are getting out. And we cannot guarantee that if you call 911, A, that the phones will work, and B, that we will be able to get back to you. So we are telling you, that's what the mandatory evacuation is.
Right.
We are telling you, get out now. So when I heard that, and, obviously with the smoke and everything, I was like, oh, this is not great. That was like the last couple blocks before I got to my house. When I got to my house, me, and a lot of people who know me are going to kind of laugh at this probably, but I have my earbuds in all the time.
Yes.
I'm always listening to podcasts or radios or something, or talking on the phone, or usually it's listening to podcasts.
But not this one, apparently.
Yeah. Well, exactly. When, I'm not on the show anymore, so what are you going to do? Anyway, no. I'm just not interested in Gremlins, Sonia. I'm sorry. No. So
He's not sorry, you guys.
Sorry, not sorry. When I stopped the car, Paradise is a very quiet place. That's one of the things that we really like about it. When I stopped the car, got out, turned the engine off, I could hear the fire. I could hear that there was some sound coming through the trees that was like, this is not normal. This is a different thing.
That's fucking scary.
Yeah. And
You're
that was
scaring me.
I'm sorry. And that was my first moment where it was like, oh, this is like, I know this is probably bad, and I know there are probably buildings burning down somewhere in town, and I know that this sucks because, we had just lived through the worst. I mean, it's kind of crazy to talk about. The worst wildfire in California history had happened 3 months ago, 70 miles from my house up in Redding.
Yes.
So we had already seen wildfires go from 0 to 60 and burn into urbanized areas very quickly.
Well, in Sonoma, too. Sonoma had their fire. Was that earlier this year or late last year?
And then there was Santa Rosa, I think, which was last year or year. Yeah. And so it was scary. So I said, all right, this is really bad. So I went in, grabbed got Harrison, and I said, and at this point, the radio was saying zones, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, are under mandatory evacuation. Zones 5, 6, 7, 8 are under advisory. And we were in zone 11, but it was kind of like, hey, they're like naming half the town.
Right.
So I said, all right, Harrison, so we started grabbing boxes and putting them in the Ford Escape, and looking around for things. And I feel really bad because when this was happening, I thought there's some chance, but I didn't really believe it at the time, that something bad really could happen. It's kind of like, in theory that it could happen,
Right, but you don't think it's going to happen to you.
Yeah, like your brain knows that it could happen, but your kind of guts still doesn't believe it. So I called up my son Dell at this point, who I had dropped off at high school, and I said, hey, bud, we're going to have to evacuate. We're going to have to go. Is there anything that you want for me to grab? He said, no, not really, but try to get my blue guitar. So I said, all right, I'll do that. So I go into the house, go into my office, start grabbing boxes of film, that my grandfather shot, photos of my boys and, that my family had shot, all that kind of stuff. Started putting them in the car. Harrison started grabbing the animals. We have 2 cats and a dog named Lucy, who you might remember from the last episode, who warned me about the oncoming terrorists that, necessitated me self-destructing the Dorking Out studios. Anyway, Now back to reality. So he started putting, he put the animals in the car, and we're kind of opening the doors of the car, putting stuff in. He's looking for cat cages in the garage. He can't find them. Things are tense, but we're not really panicked yet.
Right.
And the other thing is,
you're in like worker mode. You're in like
worker serious mode.
Yeah.
But and one of the things that's kind of bad about living in wildfire country or whatever is you get evacuated sometimes, or you get advisories sometimes. And the idea is, and this is kind of a talking point that's come up with Paradise, is in the 2008 Humboldt, it was called the Humboldt Fire. It started in Butte Canyon, went through the canyon, up the canyon wall, and then started coming towards Paradise. And it took hours and hours and hours to go through all that. And that was the height of summer. So you're kind of used to, if they're going to evacuate us, we're going to have a chunk of time where the advisories go from, informational to warning to mandatory. You have and you can kind of count down like, now it's a warning, we better go or something. So I thought, all right, we got the escape packed up. Now we're going to start packing up the van. But I was going in and out of my office, which is where all these pictures were, and I couldn't find a set of videotapes of the boys, when they were babies. Like the first videos I have of them. And I was just tearing up my office, like taking out drawers, dumping it on the ground, looking for stuff. I couldn't understand where this stuff was. So I was spending a lot of time in the office looking for this stuff, because that was the kind of thing I definitely wanted to get.
Of course.
So we go back out, put the last of what it turned out was the last of the stuff we were going to take into the escape. Around this time, I started looking kind of up. Our house is kind of on this little hill, looking up the street, and the smoke was getting really thick. It was going from this is night, but you can still see it for a ways, to this is really foggy. And there comes a point where the smoke is so thick, or the fog is so thick, that it's not safe to drive.
Right.
So I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of like number 2. 1, I can hear the fire. 2, now I'm starting to wonder if it's going to be safe to drive. So as all this was happening, our cat Kermit got out of the car and kind of raced to our porch, raced around to the back of the house as Harrison and I kind of tried to corral him on each side, and then ran across a bridge, a little wooden bridge that we have over a creek behind our house, back into a pasture that's behind our house. And it was kind of like we're not going to be able to catch that cat.
Yeah.
And then so Harrison and I were worrying about it and kind of trying to figure out what to do when we started hearing these big bangs, which we didn't know at the time. It sounded like, wow, that sounded like an explosion. That sounded really big, and it sounded kind of far off, but it was like not just one. So it was kind of like, between the sound of the fire, between the smoke obscuring things, now we're hearing explosions. It's like we need to get out sooner rather than later. So I said, I'm sorry, son. We're leaving right now. We have to. We just have to go. We can't run around after the cat. We can't, whatever. And at some point, I haven't really told anybody this, but there was an episode of Star Trek going through my mind.
Oh dear.
At that moment, which is very weird. There's
the one with the tribbles. It was the one with the tribbles.
That's right. No, there's
very unrelated to anything that was going on.
That's right. There was an episode, and I don't know why this kind of. I think subconsciously, I guess I know why this came up, which is there was an episode where the counselor Deanna Troi was trying to become like a commander, like she wanted to actually, maybe become a captain someday or whatever. So she was doing this command training, and she kept failing. And she couldn't figure out why she was failing. And the thing is, she's trying to solve this technical problem on the holodeck, and she keeps failing, and the virtual ship keeps blowing up, and she just can't figure it out. And then at a certain point, she realizes that what the simulation was doing is testing whether or not she would knowingly choose to order somebody to their death. Like if she had the steel to know that she's doing something, knowing that you have to make this awful decision that hurts this one person, but it saves the ship, or it saves, it's for the greater good, but it's an incredibly painful, guilt-inducing decision. So it's weird the way pop culture works and the stories that we tell ourselves work, because on the one level, it's this kind of it literally was like the B plot of this episode,
right? But
then in another sense, it's kind of like it was meaningful because
you learned something from it.
Well, yeah, and it helped me remember something that's important, because I could definitely think of Harrison and I running around the pasture, trying to get the cat, trying to catch it, running back and forth. And even at this point, I was still thinking maybe we're leaving a little earlier than we need to, but we are going to leave. But it was kind of like when we heard the explosions, it was going to take God knows how long to find the cat. It's like, I hope the cat's going to be okay. Cats are resilient. But all these other factors are adding up that I have to go. So I said, Harrison, I'm sorry, we got to go. Because, I said, we're not going to pack the van. We're not going to pack anything else. I'm not going to let you drive alone. We are going to drive together, because the visibility was starting to get crazy. So we jumped in the car and drove off. And we kind of drove some back roads, got onto Neil Road, which is kind of an alternate to the Skyway. And I think we were the last people out of Paradise before the gridlock that everybody has heard about happened. And,
so
as we were driving, it was pretty unpleasant. And as we were,
understatement, I suspect.
Yeah, sorry. It was, but I was kind of like in shock. So that's kind of what it was. It's like, this is unpleasant, but this is not, didn't feel like it was life-changing at the moment. It felt like it could be, but anyway, so we, as we were driving down, I realized, I didn't get Dell's guitar. I didn't get, and then I realized I didn't even walk into my bedroom. I didn't walk into the bathroom. I didn't walk into Dell's room. I didn't walk into the laundry room. Like half of the house, I didn't even touch once I came back. And, which is weird, because it's like I keep saying this and I keep thinking this is, when you move out of a house, there's all these melancholy feelings and all these memories and all these whatever and all these thoughts and all these history. And this was like it's like I was going to get a packet of cigarettes and my house vanishes. It was like you didn't know it was the last time.
Right, of course.
And then we got to Chico and realizing, we didn't pack anything. Like, we're thinking about, we're not going to be going back to Paradise tonight, whatever happens. They're not going to lift the evacuations. They're starting to close roads off. At that point, they were actually turning every road in Paradise one way out.
Right.
So even if you wanted to drive back, there was no route in, because the left and the right lanes of all the 2-lane roads were going out.
Yeah. So you packed stuff, but you didn't pack, like, clothes or...
No, I didn't pack my medicine.
Right.
I didn't pack clothes. I didn't pack a toothbrush. I didn't pack anything.
But you did remember your Transformers box set.
Yeah, exactly.
You fucking love the Transformers so much.
Yeah. That for those of you newly listening to this, because you're wondering about the 3 Days in Paradise project, that is a running joke that goes back way to the early days of dorking out when I could care about things like stupid Michael Bay movies. But anyway, so we get to Chico and it's kind of like, oh my God, I literally did get out with this shirt on my back.
Jesus.
like all these weird cliches started popping up, and it was just like, oh my God, and then we were wondering, okay, how bad is it? And throughout the, so we picked up Dell, and by that point, there were a lot of kids from Paradise that went to the school that go to the school that Dell goes to. It's called Inspire High School in Chico, California, and they had pulled all the kids out and given them into like a special assembly.
Yes.
Hold on just for a second. You might hear some stuff in the background because actually I am recording this talking to my friend Sonia from the back of a trailer where we are living, and my wife needs to come in here and start to go to bed because the boys are going to the bed in the front of the trailer. So you might hear some stuff and you're just going to have to live with it. Sorry.
They can handle it.
Right.
They deal with Calvin running in the room. They can handle this.
That's right. So I picked up Dell. They had already had this assembly where they kind of told the kids, hey, your town's on fire. If your parents are coming to pick you up, that's fine. Picked Dell up. I went to a little coffee place with the boys, a little breakfast place, pulled out my computer, and they were going on Facebook, and we were starting to go on Facebook. And I was just trying to get some idea of like how bad this is. Because I figured it was bad when we're hearing explosions, something's got to be going on. And I started, like, these pictures would be popping up in people's feeds of this on fire, that on fire. And I'd be like, and all these crazy rumors started just running rampant all over. So my kind of reporting instincts kicked in. And I said, all right, there's a lot of FUD that's coming in through Facebook. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to plot what I can see in these pictures and just see what's going on. So it's like, this is on fire. So I pull up a map of Paradise and plot it here. This is on fire. Here's a picture. This is on fire. Here's a picture. And then as I started plotting everything, there was pins all over Paradise. It's like you couldn't even get like a sense of, oh, it's over here and it's moving this way. It's everywhere.
Right.
And that really started to worry me. And then another friend of mine sent me a picture of Paradise has a somewhat famous town sign. It's this big wooden town sign where it says, Paradise, maybe all that its name implies, all that the name implies, and it's got all these rotary signs, everything, and a big, piece of saw, and it was a picture of that sign on fire, and that sign is not deep into Paradise. It's like right at the edge of Paradise towards Chico. So it's kind of like, if that's on fire, the whole town is probably already on fire. And if the whole town's on, then it's just kind of like, then I just kind of went into shock.
Yeah.
And, and people talk about, oh, firefighters and first responders are, they're heroes and this and that. And they are. And I don't mean to minimize it. But one of the things that I don't think has really gotten out yet, and that's one of the reasons that I want to kind of be careful and tell this story well, is the fire department and the police department, the sheriff's department, CHP were directing people out, but the fire department and the CAL FIRE were not really fighting the fire, and they shouldn't have fought the fire. What they were actually doing is the fire was catching so many things in town on fire that people were not able to evacuate fast enough. So what they were doing is like they would, somebody would rear end somebody or have a car accident. It would back up a chunk of traffic. People would panic and start to get out of their cars and just kind of run all over the place. And, the fire department would like take them into a Walgreens and keep a group of people there while they could figure out how to clear the roads.
Right. And then kind of protect that Walgreens. Right.
Right. And they would protect that Walgreens. And what they would do is, and this happened several times, one of our friends was like this, like there would be a strip of road with trees and buildings on fire on both sides and hundreds of people lined up trying to get through it. And what they were doing is they were calling in airstrikes of fire retardant. And one of our friends was sitting in her car when this plane flew over the road and just dropped fire retardant that, for like a mile down this road, or not a mile, but a long ways down this road to keep all those people alive. Or then they would be dropping it on the Walgreens to keep that from burning while everything else around it was on fire. So that's essentially what the fire department was doing. They were not able to fight the fire, and they shouldn't have really fought the fire. They were just keeping people alive in paradise long enough to get the roads clear and to get people out.
Well, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that is the most important thing, and that is kind of like, so in a sense they weren't firefighters, they were just straight up rescuers. Right. Driving into flames.
Yeah.
It's what's
and I should tell listeners, like, there's footage out there that people have been taking did take as they were driving through the town to get out.
Yeah.
And it's fucking scary as hell. Like it's just wall of fire on either side, with like children and animals in their car. And, they're like, I can feel the heat and the smoke. Yeah. And I can't even imagine how scared people were.
Yeah, well, it's really weird. And what's awful is the thing that for me is the worst. And I have been extremely lucky in the way that this has affected me, or I should say not affected me, compared to most other people, is that, and there are several factors that are like this. And I was talking to our insurance adjuster and he was saying the only thing he could think of that was kind of like this was 9/11. And it's not exactly like 9/11, but there's a lot of strange, weird details that are kind of creepy and disturbing on their own that you don't really crop up in a lot of disasters, even the worst kind of disasters. Like one of the pictures I saw was the parking lot in the Feather River Hospital, which is actually where my son Harrison was born. There were all these, not gurneys that you take people out to put them in an ambulance or not wheelchairs. There were actual hospital beds.
Right.
Dozens of them just strewn in the corner of the parking lot because they had essentially shoved everyone out of the hospital, put them in ambulances, put them in pickup trucks, put them in private cars, put them in every vehicle they could grab, and sent them out.
Yes.
So when you see, and that's not the kind of thing, when a hospital is moving patients, they are extremely careful, extremely thoughtful, extremely calculated, extremely practiced in how you move sick people. So if they are kind of cutting all of those corners, it's kind of one of those things where you can see the panic just in the fact that that there are 15 hospital beds in the corner of some parking lot.
Right.
Some of them are falling over, some of them are whatever. And we all know, we've talked about healthcare and whatever. We all know how expensive all that stuff is. So the fact that half of this stuff is just strewn all over and completely forgotten and abandoned is like, that was.
And those people and those doctors and those nurses, they're heroes.
They are.
Like they have their families and their homes, and I'm sure they're worried about their loved ones and they stay behind and they take care of people when they need it the most. It's amazing.
Yeah, and they know, and we're friends with some of these people. They know their house is burning down as they're doing this. They know that, there's one story of a pregnant woman, a woman who's getting it in the middle of a cesarean section. The baby is born. The nurses give the baby to the father and tell him to leave the hospital and go to Chico immediately.
Oh, my God.
And he says, no, I'm waiting for my wife. And they said, no, don't worry. We will get your wife out. We promise. But you have to leave now. So he took the newborn baby, took off. They put the wife in an ambulance, and she's in the middle of a cesarean, so she's paralyzed from the legs down.
Yes.
So they take her out in a couple ambulances. The ambulances get kind of caught up. I'm still tracking down some of the details, but a lot of this I've verified. One of the ambulances becomes disabled. They take everybody out of that ambulance, put them into the other ambulance, continue to drive. That ambulance gets blocked.
Oh my gosh.
So some firefighters essentially pile everyone out of that ambulance, put them in a house, teach the nurses in like 10 minutes, this is how you defend an area from fire. Here's some shovels, find spot fires, put them out, dig them out, smash them, throw dirt on them, whatever. You guys have to protect this house because we have to go do this other stuff. It is your job to essentially save the lives of these patients in this house. We got to go. So then those nurses fought the fire for
Jesus Christ.
I know. Exactly. So those nurses and I've kind of been joking about this, but not really.
Tell me that the story has an okay ending. So I don't have a panic attack.
No. They all got out.
Okay.
But it's kind of like they all got out, but the fact that they're nurses fighting fires.
Yeah.
Because things are so bad that the firefighters have to go do stuff that's even more dangerous and crazy, is just like all of those things added up. It's just weird. And, I was talking about how this is kind of like 9/11 is just this entire town has been obliterated by fire. And one of the weirder moments was I woke up and my sister, who she really likes The Crown, and she's kind of like a Britophile, I guess is what it is. Anglophile.
That's it.
She said, "Hey, Queen Elizabeth has a message for you." I was oh my God, what? And it was just like this thing. Oh, the Queen from Buckingham Palace would like to send all her sympathies to the victims of the campfire, whatever. And it was just like, you were in deep shit if Queen Elizabeth is sending her sympathies to you.
Yes.
And because
probably before our president did, correct?
Exactly. Well, I think it was, but that's a whole other thing that it's kind of like I have too much. All my fuses have been blown. I couldn't even really pay attention to it. Like he was like a mile from me, and it was just like I'm not even walking over there. I'm not even doing anything.
Why would you? Would you? He's just gonna. What is he gonna do? Throw paper towels at you or something?
Exactly.
Like he's such a stupid asshole.
I am not dealing with this.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's all these weird. And the only other time I remember Queen Elizabeth doing stuff like that was after 9/11 when she had the Buckingham Palace guards or whatever play the American national anthem rather than God Save the Queen or whatever is their traditional changing of the guard music or whatever. Right. So yeah, it's kind of like there are all these weird, disturbing, creepy details, and then the Queen is like paying attention to what's happening. It was just crazy. So actually, last thing I will say, because I just realized
it's not going to be the last thing you say, but continue.
No, it's not going to be the last thing I say. But a week later, I I had already started talking to people in the county about doing a documentary, and one of the CAL FIRE spokespeople was kind enough to come with me up to Paradise and let me start to shoot footage of the aftermath. And he was kind enough to go by my house, take me by my house, and there's a video on my Facebook page that I will link to you. I'll give the link to Sonia of us finding Kermit again. Kermit was injured but ultimately fine, and is on the mend. So Kermit made it out.
Yay, Kermit!
So yes,
that story was so amazing. It made me cry. I was so happy.
Yeah, I was very happy too. And what's crazy is we originally...
And I like the video. He is pissed at you, though.
Oh, yeah. Like, you could kind of tell from the video. But what's funny is we got Kermit originally 8 years ago or whatever it was, because it was when he was a kitten, had the loudest meow I've ever heard from a cat. Like, nothing is even close. And Laura and I were working from home that day, and it was raining, and it was just like this constant meowing. And that's what actually got us to find the cat, and somebody had abandoned this kitten, and we brought it in, and I was like, no.
They abandoned him because of that meow. Is that what you think? They were like, dear Lord.
But goddamn, this cat is loud. So when I'm walking down after the fire, and this is almost 1 week to the minute of when we left, I say, hey, Kermit, here, kitty, and literally that's all I said, and I hear this very loud meowing, just
he was
like
pissed.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough to get interviewed on The Takeaway from Public Radio International. We kind of tell this story, but Kermit was really pissed, but also like really intent on talking to me, and like his eyes were wide, and he was kind of looking around, and I eventually picked him up and started taking him around, and he was still just screaming, not screaming, but really like talking. Yeah. You know how like some cats do.
He's seen some shit.
Yeah, and his eyes were like darting around. It's like, hey man, did you see what happened to the house? Where have you been? I've been stuck here for a week.
I tried to protect the house.
I tried to protect the house, but it's all gone. All the blackberries gone. I haven't found a rat in 7 days. There's nothing here.
What happened?
I ran through tar. The roof burned. Did you see that? The house is good. Where's the dog? Where have you been? Goddamn.
Poor thing.
So that's kind of what Kermit seemed to be doing. So yeah, it was pretty. And there are some photos on my Facebook page of Kermit in the moments right after we get it, and his eyes are gigantic. So yeah, it was. So that's essentially part of the story. That's how we got out. That's how we kind of experienced the first couple days. That's kind of a lot of the, trauma that a lot of people have gone through, and that actually is another thing. That is kind of like 9/11 in a weird ways, because the fire, and we didn't know this at the time, but all of Paradise was on fire and essentially burned or burning by noon. There was this impression in the first couple days, and even with people that lived in Paradise and evacuated and saw all this stuff on fire, it's like, well, it takes a long time for a town to burn down.
Right.
Not really.
Because it what time were you driving Dell? You said like 7:30?
Yeah, I was driving a half an hour. It started at 6:34 in the morning is what we've learned. By 8:45 or 9, I was leaving, and the sky was black.
Right.
By noon, and since then I've actually talked to some of the CAL FIRE officials and looked at some of the CAL FIRE maps, and what they have is these kind of maps of like these rainbow maps, which is like blue, the blue area burned by this time, the light blue area burned by this time, the purple area burned by this time, the blah, blah, and then it kind of radiates out, and like the edge is red, and like that's where the fire is whenever the map was made, and they made like several of these maps a day. Anyway,
do you think because you're putting together all this stuff for a docu-series, do you think learning all this stuff, is it helping you process what happened at all?
Somewhat. I've always been somebody that gets into the details of how things like this happen. And it does help me kind of understand, and that's the thing is, like, I thought I was being overly cautious and maybe panicking a little at the beginning. But when I saw this map, everything that I knew of as Paradise was gone by noon on that day. So 5.5 hours from when the fire was first reported to when the entire town was on fire or already burned, that was it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing we talk on another show that I do, the NorCal News Now. It's the political podcast that we do here in the North State. We had the mayor of Paradise, Jody Jones, and she was saying that it's kind of confirmed what we had all thought, which is essentially there was no one wall of fire that went through town. There was so much kind of this firestorm going on that embers were raining down all over the town. So there was fire kind of by my house before half of the rest of the town had caught on fire, kind of in between the main fire and where I live. So there were all these weird details, like the Paradise sign was burning relatively early compared to when some of the other parts of the town burned, because there was just fire raining down everywhere. I suspect I was the last person out of Paradise that did not actually see a flame, because there were people that I know for a fact left 10 minutes after me, and they were driving through fire on both sides.
It's so scary.
Yeah. So
what have you been watching? No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. Kidding.
I can remember. And that's kind of the other reason that I wanted to be on the show, to kind of talk about this with everybody. And I know that you and I started this podcast as a way to think about stories, as a way to think about why we like stories, what's important to us about stories. But now... And
then I changed the show to just me and Margot shitting all over people's childhood favorites.
No, that's fine. That's good. Sometimes you got to pick up a story and shake it to still see if it holds together. And sometimes it comes apart in your hands. I'm looking at you, Revenge of the Nerds. Anyway. Now in the last couple days, I've announced kind of the biggest creative project I've ever been a part of. And it's so big, I don't know how it's going to go. My hope is to kind of tell the story of the Paradise Fire, or tell the story of the campfire, because it's not just Paradise, it's Magalia, our town a little bit further up the ridge was mostly destroyed. Concow, kind of a little community of really kind of independent livers, I believe is 100% destroyed. I could be incorrect about that. But, I don't want people to just think of Paradise and think of all this as just a big fire and a tragedy and everything sucks and it's awful, because there were a lot of people, sheriffs, boards of supervisors, state representatives, our congressman Doug LaMalfa, who have worked for years to get funds to make Paradise safer, to make it possible for people to evacuate. And because that's I think I dropped this thread earlier. One of the things where it was also kind of like 9/11 is after 9/11, in the first couple days after 9/11, there was kind of like the question of how many people were killed.
Yeah.
The towers came down and Rudy Giuliani said that famous thing is like, we don't know what the number is, but, and we hope something like we hope it's not more than we can bear, but it's going to be really bad. And that's kind of, there was a point where there were Laura, my wife is just coming here, 3,000 people missing here in Paradise, or was it 1,000 people that were missing?
It was like 1,800.
Yeah.
1,800. Yeah, there was a moment where there were 1,800 people missing, and who knows? And we truly didn't know if those people, were going to be found. The number now looks like it's probably about 110 confirmed dead or missing.
Less than 10 missing.
What was that?
Less than 10 are still missing.
Oh, now there's less than 10 still missing. So that's good. But it's this kind of weird thing where this horrible thing happens and then it lingers for days of just like, how bad was it? And nobody really gets to go up and see, except for fire, police officers and fire officials. And they're not going to start spouting, numbers off the top of their heads. So
right.
Kind of no information is coming out, but it looks all the context clues are really awful. So sorry, I'm getting diverted a little bit.
No, you're fine.
What I want to do is kind of tell the story of the time leading up to the fire, the people that have worked to make things safe, and kind of how governments work, how people work, how communities work, people trying to see problems down the road, and what they can do about them. Because now, a lot of times you'll go to like a governmental meeting and they'll say, well, we should pay for this because in the future we might need this.
Right.
And somebody else says, no, we're not going to need that, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Well, I've been in some of these meetings. One of the jobs that I have, or one of the contracts that my video production company has, is doing video for the Board of Supervisors. And they had these, so I've sat in on some of these meetings where they were talking about escape routes out of Paradise. And it's like, now we know that if we didn't have some of the escape routes that they worked hard to put in, and if Sheriff Honey had not essentially had to evacuate the town of Oroville 18 months ago and learned certain things about changing everything into a one-way flow out of a certain area, if he hadn't done that, and if, these things hadn't happened, there would have been thousands of people killed.
Right. Emergency
Paradise.
Preparedness is not very sexy.
It's not very sexy, but I know for a fact it saved thousands of lives in Paradise 3 weeks ago. And just, there's all these dramatic stories, but there's all these, this feels like a very Ken Burnsy kind of story where there's a million little threads of society and history and geography and social connectedness. But then there's also these super spectacular, very specific, then there's moments where nurses are literally stamping flames out in the front yard of some house they've never been to because patients whose lives are depending on them are cowering inside.
Yes.
It's just, or there's families of people jumping in a lake with their dogs and their cats and their horses and watching as the lake, everything around the lake, 360 degrees burns. There was one.
I heard the story about a guy who came back to, I think, his house and a horse had jumped in his pool. Did you hear this story?
I have heard about that, and I do. That is one of the ones that I need to track down. Where I guess a horse had jumped in his pool and kind of got tangled up in the pool covering.
Yeah. So the horse was alive and just chilling, but like couldn't get out. So he had to help the horse out of his pool. And I'm like, never underestimate animals. They're super smart.
Well, here's something that's interesting. So one of the ways that I've gotten back to go back up to Paradise is because I have these other responsibilities, and people at the county are not paying for me to do a documentary, but they're being very supportive of me doing a documentary. So they kind of talk to me about, this is what you have to do to get access. So I've gotten kind of media credentials. I've gone up following all the rules. And there are other people that I know that are in media organizations that don't typically cover this kind of stuff. But we got them media credentials, and they're kind of people that I know from clients and whatever.
Right.
And every time we've gone up to look for a cat, the cat's been there. My cat was there.
That's crazy.
Two other cats. So it's essentially like 100% batting average that all the cats all the cats survived, from the pool of 4 observers that
Cats are super smart.
So, yeah.
I think that's what's important here. Look, we all need to learn an important lesson here, and I think the lesson is cats are super smart.
They are. So yeah. So that's, and part of me is very
happy, sad.
Well,
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I was gonna say, it's like regretful, but not really. Melancholy is, I did want to step away from the show to finish writing Jet Jergens. I did want to step away to do these other projects, but this is a project that I have to try to do.
You absolutely have to try to do it. There's so much that there's just a lot of stories here that need to be told. And I think there's a lot that people need to learn from this, because it's not just what happened, in Paradise and the surrounding towns. It, like we said, it happened in Santa Rosa, it happened in Redding, it happened in Oroville, it happened in Sonoma. And then you're talking about like Hurricane Sandy and all the other like flooding that we've been having, and the earthquake in Alaska, and I live in San Francisco. It's like earthquake city. It's everybody here, everybody should be watching something like this and learning something about like what's important, but also like how to be prepared. And how to like what's amazing is that you are able to keep like a calm, a straight head. I'm trying to think of the right word. Like, you just kept it together, and you were able to think, logically, and get out of there when you did.
Well,
I don't know if I could. I'm pretty sure I would run around like a chicken with my head cut off, and then my husband would have to like slap me, and then like everybody would line up to slap me like the woman in the movie Airplane. Like that would be me.
You can always get me with an airplane reference.
You're welcome.
Well, you know what? I do appreciate you saying that, but in all honesty, you would have done exactly what I did. You would have gone, and a lot of people worry about what they would do when something like this happens. But you would have done, you would have gotten there. Things would have looked bad. You would have tried to grab some stuff that's important, not just trivial stuff that's important. You would have seen the smoke. You would have heard the roar, even though it wasn't like a roar in my ear, but it was like you could hear it in the distance. You would have heard the explosions, and you would have said, it's time to go.
Yeah.
And then you would have left.
Right.
So, I appreciate it when people say this. You're not the first to say this, but I kind of feel guilty when people say it, because it's like I did something special, but and I guess maybe from the outside it might look like that, but from the inside it's like, oh no, any 99 people out of 100 would have done exactly what I did. And and this is going to sound incredibly grandiose, so I apologize right now for what I'm saying.
He's not sorry, you guys.
But you know, when back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when there were still a lot of World War II veterans alive, and people would say, "Oh, you guys are so great, you're so heroic, you're so this, you're so that," and almost all of them would go, "No, we're not. I just did what blah blah blah." You know what I mean?
Right.
And you would think, "Oh, no, come on, really? They're just being modest, or they're just being whatever." I don't think so. Even though I haven't done anything like any of that. You know, it's kind of like if you're a nurse, you know, like if you're evacuating your house and there are explosions going off somewhere, you're going to get out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or if you're a nurse and you've dedicated your whole life to saving people and making them better, and now what you have to do in order to achieve that is fight a fire. You're going to fight a fire. You know what I mean? Like you're going to...
I don't know. That feels above and beyond the Call of Duty for a nurse.
It does, but like it's like when you're really when you're there, it seems like it's kind of like what kind of person would not do that?
Right. No, I understand. You
know, and then it's kind of like almost like a psychopath that is also completely eager to see death and destruction. That's the only kind of person that would do that. Even a psychopath would see, wow, if I save all these people, I'm going to look great. So even most psychopaths would do the right thing under those circumstances.
I don't know about that.
And that's why I did what I no. Just kidding.
He's not kidding.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the old Chris coming out. So yeah,
So tell people where they can find more about what you're working on.
Right. So what I'm working on is it's a documentary project. Right now I'm calling it a docu-series because I suspect it will be longer than a 2-hour movie, but we'll see what happens. It's called 3 Days in Paradise. It's about not just Paradise, it's about the entire campfire, but it's also about, essentially I was thinking about it, and the entire nation kind of went through this during the 9/11 things, and I think everybody that lives through a crisis like this, it's kind of like this, is there's the day before, the day whatever happens, and then there's the day after, where everything has changed and it's not going back to the way it was before, and you have to live in this new reality that you didn't choose and that was given to you by calamity. So that's kind of what it is they're kind of 3 metaphorical days. All the history of I'm not going to tell all the history of Paradise, but we're going to talk about where Paradise came from, the kind of community it was, the kind of people that lived there, tell the story of the fire, and then tell the story of what comes after. You know, a lot of people want to rebuild. A lot of people want to return, but there are a lot of very hard, practical truths that I think a lot of people are not really coming to terms with yet. And I don't blame them. I think even people who live in Paradise I couldn't register the depth of the destruction until I literally drove through it.
Yeah, we're talking about an entire town. It's like, how does an entire town rebuild? Yeah.
And you'll see these things like, and I don't mean to minimize tornado damage or something, but you'll see things like, oh, this town got destroyed, but really it's kind of a very small town with like 3 neighborhoods, and and one big tornado can kind of take it all out or whatever. This is, it's 6, 7, 8 miles from one side to the other. It's 10 miles from the beginning of it to the end of it, and all of it is gone.
Yeah.
I mean,
by the way, that's San Francisco. San Francisco is 7 by 7.
Yeah, think of think of all of San Francisco, every neighborhood, every side street, every neighbor, every attraction, everything burned to the ground.
Yeah.
That's one of the weird experiences I had is when my wife and I started dating, she lived on a street called Castle Drive in Paradise, and I was driving somewhere, and I realized as we were driving there that I was one street over. And I thought, and somebody else was driving, so I was kind of looking out the window, and I was thinking, oh, you know what? I should go over and see if that house is still there. And then I realized I was kind of idly staring out the window, and then I realized, oh, I can kind of see the next street over because all the houses on this street are burned. And then I realized, oh, I don't see any houses on the next street. Those houses are all burned. And then and what you can do is you can essentially not count chimneys, but you can tell where the streets are by how far away the chimneys are. And it was like I could see for 6 or 7 blocks. And it was like, there's nothing. Oh, I guess that burned down because I'm not only seeing to the next block, I'm seeing to the block after that. And that's just one neighborhood. And I've been all around Paradise, and there are houses here and there weird little.
I was just going to ask, like, how many houses have you seen that aren't burned down?
I've seen 2 in my neighborhood. I've seen.
And how did that happen?
I don't know. One,
I'm like, that's crazy.
One, I think they essentially cleared all the trees around it. One, I don't know how. I've seen maybe 10 houses altogether, but I mean, and a lot of the areas that were saved, I now realize are along the escape routes. Because I think essentially they were trying to keep those safe. They were trying to keep those open.
Okay,
so,
I getcha.
And even a lot of the stores along those were burned. So, it was just, it's so the scale of the destruction is so big that it's going to take years. When we were talking to the mayor of Paradise, and she was talking about the way forward and rebuilding and everything, because nobody wants to have their lives changed by something like this, and it's kind of like you don't want to let the fire win. I'm going to go back, I'm going to rebuild, I'm going to get the town back, and screw you, and we're doing this. Paradise strong, that kind of thing. She was telling me that she talked to the people who were dealing with the recovery of Santa Rosa, and Santa Rosa took 6 months for them just to clear the debris off the, just to clear the debris and okay for rebuilding. And then it's another year after you get an okay to rebuild before stuff is rebuilt and you can go. And that was, Santa Rosa was 1/4, I think, of the size of what's happened in Paradise. So, there's a reasonable estimate that it could be 2 to 3 years before people are living there like it's a town again. It's entirely possible that no one will really be living there for the next year.
Well, and then will people even really want to move back? Like, because in that time, maybe they move somewhere else and they settle down there and they're like, maybe I like it here, and stay where they are. And
and that's kind of embittering.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have your life changed by something like this. But after you've lived in a place for a year, are you going to want to upend yourself and then go back to the place where all this happened?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. That's what we're all going to find out. That's what I'm going to be talking to people about. That's what part of this documentary, we all want to find hope. We all want to find a better way. We all want to look to the future with optimism, and something of Paradise will come back. But I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where we're going to go. And so, that's why so if you go to 3daysinparadise.tv or you go to facebook.com/3daysinparadise, let me know what you think. Let me know what you're going to do. Let me know what your story is, because right now I'm just gathering every bit of information I can. There are kind of 3 phases to doing a documentary. There's the research phase, the writing and producing phase, and the editing it all together phase, finishing it phase. And right now I am deep into just finding out what happened. And
yeah, well, there's a lot to ask and talk and get people's stories. And when you're talking to people now, how do they seem? Like, because it's we're like 3 weeks out. Are they still in shock? Are they angry? Or
there's a million different emotions. They're starting to come out of the shock, starting to come out of the drama. They're starting, the world around us is starting to move on to other things. So, and we still have to earn money. We still have to make a living. Kids still have to go to school. We still have to do all this stuff. So there's kind of like this second wave of the world is not paying attention necessarily, and we're kind of going back to normal somewhat. But we're not going back to normal because everything, Laura and I.
Everything's
and the boys,
different.
Everything's different. Laura and I are living in a trailer. Not that we're complaining, but it's kind of like trailers are fun for, and this is not a like a motor or a.
It's not like when you go to a mobile park, like a mobile park home.
It's not a mobile home.
A mobile home park. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's not a mobile home. It's a trailer that is meant for vacationing.
Yes.
We have 2 teenage boys and 2 old cranky man and wife. So they.
You're old and cranky.
That's right. Laura's just cranky.
No.
Just kidding.
No. Laura's the best.
Oh, she is the best. You know why she's the best? Because she hates the Gilmore Girls. And the Gilmore Girls suck, and she is 100% correct in her assessment. That's right. She has made more of an impression.
Maybe that's a really good way for you to explain it to people what happened. Imagine if Stars Hollow completely burned down.
That's right. Now, take that feeling and reverse it and pretend as though Stars Hollow burning down was a bad thing. That is actually what's going on. So imagine Stars Hollow burned down, reverse it, and now you know what it's like for Paradise to burn down. I do have to tell you, as an old journalist, because Sonia and I have degrees in journalism, the very bitter humor I've been living through over the past, with all of the Paradise puns and knee-jerk Paradise headlines we've seen over the last year.
How many people had headlines that said Paradise lost?
All of them, apparently.
Right?
60 Minutes had it on tonight.
Oh, my God. Lazy. That's lazy. 60 Minutes, because that's the first thing I would have thought of.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the first thing I would have thought of. And I told Del, it's kind of funny. We've been playing this weird little game. This is the kind of life we've been living where this is the game that we're playing, which is, I told him, I think just a couple hours after the fire was going, and I think we might have even been at breakfast. I said, you watch, there's going to be a million bad Paradise headlines.
Oh, yeah.
And I rattled off like 3 or 4 of them. And over the last 3 weeks, every time one pops up, he'll look at me and point. And it's like, hey, look at this. And we were watching 60 Minutes tonight, and they had a thing on. There were 2 stories, one of which was George H.W. Bush died. The other of which is Paradise lost.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, oh, my God.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Well, your wife has a degree in journalism, too, and she worked in newspapers and things like that. So
that's right.
I'm sure that kind of so many people who work at newspapers have this like kind of messed up sense of humor, but and have a stronger constitution, I guess, for for dark things, because for grim things, because you're covering bad news all the time. So I'm sure you guys are exercising that muscle right now.
Yeah, we were definitely, it was kind of like, because we are journalists, and actually I'm kind of getting back into journalism with this new project. And I part of it was kind of like, we expected more of you, 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
We expect the Spokane, Washington, blah, blah, holiday shopper to go with the most obvious top line, Paradise Lost, or, Paradise Goes to Hell, or shit like that.
Oh, my God.
But it's just kind of like, fire and, hell comes to paradise or whatever.
Did somebody have that one?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, no, not just one. Yeah, just kind of, there's like a hell and paradise. Paradise becomes a living hell, or it's all, So
cool.
That's what's been going on with me. So the point is, if you ever have the chance to retire from a podcast, don't make some long, elaborate sketch about how you're blowing up your house, destroying everything you love when you do it, because a couple days later your entire town might burn down, and then you'll feel like a heel.
Then it's basically you've turned into the podcaster who cries wolf.
Pretty much.
So good job.
Yeah, this is the worst podcast ever.
You might be right.
No, I'm not right.
Tell people again where they can find everything about you and what you're working on.
Go to 3 Days in Paradise. That's all spelled out. No capitals, no numbers. 3daysinparadise.tv. On Facebook, 3 Days in Paradise. On Twitter, I think it's 3 Days in Paradise, because Twitter doesn't like long names, I guess, or whatever.
I guess.
Instagram, 3 Days in Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're going. And this is a situation where it might be crowdfunded.
Okay.
We might get funding from PBS. I'm talking to some production companies now with connections to Netflix and Discovery Channel and Amazon Prime, but it's all, there's so many moving pieces and there's so much still to do that we don't know where it's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to make it all on our own and sell it. We don't know if HBO is going to parachute in 3 weeks from now and write a big check and then we do it. We don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So,
there's stories to be told, and you're definitely the person to do it.
So thank you. I appreciate that. And this is where the actual Chris humility is going to kick in. I hope you're right. I'm not sure that you are, but I'm really going to try. And if there's anybody out there that would like to help, lend a hand, lend whatever, please get in touch with me. I am looking for all the help I can grab at the moment.
Okay. You heard him, you dorks.
Yeah,
help him out. So I'll have all those links in the show notes and in the blog post. And I'm also going to find some GoFundMes for various people that I know need help.
Yes.
Through this.
And I'll send you some links too, because there are some people that really need some help that don't have the tech savviness that some of us do. So they are kind of getting left behind when it's only blind luck that is hurting them. So let's try to help them out.
Yes.
So that's the story there.
So thank you, everybody, for listening. You could find Dorking Out at dorkingoutshow.com, and on Twitter, Dorking Out Show, and on Facebook, Dorking Out Show. And you can find me on Twitter at The Sonia Show. And like I said, I'm going to put everything in the show notes and on the blog so that you can find everything and we can help some of these people out. And follow Smith's stuff because it's going to be awesome. He's got really great story to tell here.
Unfortunately. But yes,
unfortunately, is a good way. Yes, it's weird to say because I'm like,
it is.
I know you're going to do such a good job, and you're going to tell these really great stories, and they need to be told. But at the same time, it's like really sad because that you have to tell them. I don't. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, it's awful. So get out there and help people.
Yes.
You might be sitting there listening, wondering, what can I do to help? There are things you can do. This is one of the times when clicking something on the internet and typing a few keystrokes can actually help.
Yes. So
we're going to give you the links. We're going to give you the keystrokes, and you can make someone's life appreciably better by giving them money. So
do it.
That's right.
Okay. And goodbye.
Bye.